Well, Halloween Ends has been released, to a deeply divided reaction from both franchise fans and movie critics alike. I've seen some people who love it, and a lot of people who despise it. I myself saw it in theaters on the 13th, the night before the actual release date, and I can certainly see why. Michael Myers himself, arguably the main draw of the entire series, is barely in the film, with the story taking a massive risk by resting its failure or success squarely on the shoulders of a brand new character, Corey Cunningham. Furthermore, it's not a particularly scary film, with much of it seeming more like a tragic Shakespearean love story than an actual horror film. However, I decided to make this video because I think David Gordon Green and his crew did a very admirable job crafting a trilogy of movies that both respected the original source material, while adding to the lore of a movie franchise I myself consider to be my absolute favorite, not only in horror, but just movies in general. All three movies are certainly not without their flaws, kills in particular, but I think that the trilogy is greater than the sum of its parts. This is my first video of this variety, and while I'm certainly no movie critic or anything like that, I feel the need to put my own thoughts out there, regardless of the reaction, whether it be criticism or just plain apathy. Some have likened the new Halloween trilogy to the Star Wars sequel trilogy, which I don't think is fair. The new films are more like the prequel trilogy in form. Sure, their execution was questionable at times, but there's no denying that having the same director and writing team for all three allowed the story to have a sense of cohesion and direction that the sequel trilogy clearly lacked. If Halloween has any analog to the Star Wars sequels, it's the Thorn trilogy. Sequel hooks created just to be tossed aside and ignored, plot elements thrown in without any knowledge of what they actually mean, like the Thorn symbol and the Man in Black. After all, that's a job for the next movie's writers to figure out. Even when the films don't quite flow on a scene-to-scene basis, everything in the Green trilogy flows idea-wise in ways the other sequels just don't. This has been an issue for the Halloween franchise, and really just about every horror franchise, for a long time. The next film's existence, or lack thereof, is entirely dependent on the performance of the film prior, so the series is strung along one film at a time, not knowing when or if there would be a follow-up. This obviously creates some difficulty in structuring a cohesive narrative across the films, an issue Green didn't really have. Green had even originally planned to film 2018 and Kills back-to-back, but decided to hold off in order to see how 2018 was received before dedicating himself fully to a trilogy. Having a coherent vision across the films allows the trilogy to be greater than the sum of its parts. Each film in the series adds a bit to the lore of Michael that more closely matches the original incarnation of Myers introduced in 1978 than the sequels that came before them. Halloween 2018 cut the familial ties between Laurie and Michael, a connection fueled by writer's block and alcohol that John Carpenter would quickly regret. The brother-sister relationship between Laurie and Michael would go on to drive the plots of every other movie in the franchise, for better or worse. Cutting this tie was, in my view, a necessary step to turn Michael Myers back into the Shape, a being whose motivations for killing are unclear and difficult to understand or predict. Halloween Kills took this evolution one step further, disabusing Laurie of the notion that she occupied Michael's every waking thought for the last 40 years. In Laurie's mind, she was the one who got away, and he could return to finish the job at any time, hence her severe paranoia and survivalist lifestyle. But don't flatter yourself, Laurie. Sure, back in 1978, he spotted her from his house and decided to spend the day stalking her per the original movie. However, everyone knows that once your mildly unhinged, gun-wielding psychiatrist comes around, it's time to scram, and he likely hadn't thought about her since. Who knows if Michael even remembered her during their reunion in 2018. Kills follows Michael's rampage trying to get to not Laurie at Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, but rather his old family home. It's like Michael is playing one of those PvE survival games. Sure, he loves exploring around Haddonfield and brutally murdering a few babysitters along the way, but the Myers home is his base where he can rest and recharge, and potentially buy overpowered healing items that he won't even use during the final boss, just in case there's an even finaler boss afterwards. It's where he will always ultimately choose to be, staring out his sister's window, whatever his motivations for doing so. Lastly, Halloween Ends reminds its audience that Michael is ultimately human. With his house demolished, he has nowhere to go, and he's undoubtedly not eating as well as he did at his 2 stints in Smith's Grove Sanatorium. Whatever evil powering Michael is having difficulty overcoming his age, malnutrition, and all the abuse he took throughout Kills. Evil will live beyond any single human, thus the need for the Corey character as an outlet to demonstrate that just because you kill Michael, that doesn't mean that evil dies tonight. Michael isn't the personification of evil, just an avatar. The movie implies there's other Lauries and Michaels out there, and there always will be. The ending, I think, could have hammered this home even harder. For example, maybe after dumping Michael's body into the shredder, they come back to Laurie's home and find Corey's body gone, similar to the ending of Halloween 1978. Instead of using Corey to merely demonstrate that a cycle of evil is possible, have him actually complete it. That being said, I'm not much of a writer myself. It's entirely possible Green feared this would just be seen as cheap sequel bait that damages the finality of Ends, so I don't really blame him for killing both characters off. I do want to talk a bit more about Ends itself and its divisiveness due to the overall direction of the story. A couple comments from various social media complaints I read all shared a similar take, which I think is roughly shared by the fanbase at large, that Michael, and not Corey, should be slashing his way toward the Strode residence, where the film would end with an epic struggle between the two. That's what I myself expected, and I'm sure it's a film I would have enjoyed, but I guess my question is, why? Why would Michael do that? It was established in Kills that Michael has no interest in Laurie. Across the Green timeline, all 3 meetings between Michael and Laurie over the past 30 years were essentially just chance, or due to a psychiatrist even more unhinged than Loomis. Certainly Laurie is an integral part to the story, and her being the one to end Michael was the correct decision from a poetic justice angle, but she's not truly linked to Michael any more than his other victims. Even if I didn't expect the trilogy to take this direction, I don't think it's wrong for it to do so, and I liked what I got in the end. For me, Ends and the trilogy as a whole did a lot of things that the prior timeline simply failed to accomplish. The sequel hook of Halloween 4, where Jamie is teased as the new killer, was, of course, entirely retconned in Halloween 5 in favor of Michael returning yet again. The higher-ups obviously feared that a film that did not prominently feature Michael as the villain would receive the same chilly reception of both Halloween 3 in 1983 and Halloween Ends today. Because of this, the idea set up by Halloween 4 that evil can spread and transcend any single human was smothered in its crib, and instead it was decided that making contact with pure evil just lets you absorb 5G psychic radiation or something. As a result, Halloween 5 became what is possibly the most boring, aimless, by-the-book slasher flick in the franchise thus far. Similarly, Ends finally killed off Michael, like actually, for good. While he was alive, Mustafa Akkad famously contractually obligated every studio that worked on a Halloween film not to kill Michael Myers to ensure another film could be made. He didn't want anyone killing the goose that laid the golden eggs, after all. His son, Malik Akkad, seems to have been more amicable, to allowing a finality to the end of Green's trilogy, with Michael accomplishing an excellent cosplay of shredded cheese. It's a pretty surefire way to ensure Michael doesn't have any chance of coming back, because leaving pretty much any ambiguity gives another writer a foot in the door to try. Carpenter tried to end the series himself with Halloween 2 by setting Michael ablaze from head to toe. So in Halloween 4, they just decided he was in a burn-induced 10-year coma. And Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 never really did explain how Michael survived a bullet to the head at the end of the first movie, so I guess he just slept it off or something. I don't know, the gunshot was never seen on screen, so I guess it could have just missed. But who cares? Overall, for my money, the David Gordon Green trilogy is the best set of Halloween films we've gotten since the original. And I don't think I'm alone in that belief. Even John Carpenter himself said he enjoyed Ends, something he refused to say about the only Myers sequel he and Deborah Hill actually had a hand in. Ultimately, I'm not here to convince you the movies are good. I know there's plenty of people who just go to see Halloween because they want to see a scary movie. So I can see why they left disappointed with Ends in particular. Maybe I just make a terrible movie critic, but regardless, I enjoyed the Green trilogy far more than I've enjoyed any of the other sequels. It's a rare thing indeed when a horror icon earns a definitive death and his victim her long-delayed hopeful ending. Is this truly the end for Halloween? Probably not, because evil never dies. But for me, this quadrilogy is over. I do look forward to the Shape living on in yet another Halloween timeline that I'm sure will come sooner than later. Good night, and happy Halloween.